Welcome to our January meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust of Amherst. We have a quorum, and why don't we begin by having review and approval of the minutes? Are there any comments, any feedback about the minutes Greg prepared? And I just want to say once more, Greg, the quality of the minutes has really been fabulous. I can kind of go back and remember the conversations, and so very grateful for that. Did anyone spot anything? Hi, welcome Grover and Allegra. Anything to point out about the minutes that we should modify before we approve them? Oh, Erica, please.
Yeah, very minor, and ditto to that comment. They're excellent minutes. And I don't have them in front of me, but there's a place where there are two thes, and there's a place where I think it says on and is. So you may just want to, it's minor, but you may just want to take a look at them. I can send you where it is.
Sure, I can search it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry about
that. Seeing no other comments, can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Minutes are approved, and so we have the opportunity this evening to learn more about the present status of the housing production plan, and also share our feedback about our views about what is worth pursuing. So I will let Greg and Tony take it from here.
And I thought I saw Tony, but maybe he's waiting to accept my promotion until we go into that. So Tony, I'm going to promote you. I'm hoping you're Barrett Planning Group Zoom 1. So I'm going to promote you to panelist right now, and then you should get a notice to accept. Here you come. I'm handing it to Tony in a minute, but just kind of to frame where we're at here. So we are kind of moving into the goals, and then fairly soon thereafter, a strategy development phase of the housing production plan, which you're all familiar with at this point as far as what that document is. We kind of kicked off the goal section of our effort on Tuesday. We had a forum at the library and downstairs in the Woodbury room, and had some great turnout and good, sort of public attention to it. And what seemed like pretty robust feedback. Lots of people writing on Post-its. I wasn't really able to absorb much of those. I talked to a lot of folks, but wasn't really able to kind of look what people are writing because I was chatting with a lot of different folks. But Tony might have some highlights from that tonight. And so where we are now is, going to get into some goals. So what I thought we could do is kind of have Tony sort of share just some highlights of the data collection we've been doing, both through census analysis and the needs assessment, into the public engagement stuff that we've been doing. And then I could kind of facilitate a little bit of just open conversation around, priority goals for this document. And I'll kind of get more into how we might approach that after Tony shares a little bit. But that's kind of where we're at. And I think with that, Tony, did I miss anything before we jump into the weeds in your piece? Or?
No, thank you, Greg. That was sorry, we're restructuring our whole Zoom license, so it's that's why I'm joining as BPG Zoom 1. But no, that was great. I have slides up. I can share that with you all, and I'll just share some points and have some updates on the projects, as well as several highlights from the data collection that we've gathered thus far, as well as the public survey that we had rolled out a few months ago. So.
For sure. And, and I, forgive me, Tony, and for the benefit of anybody who might be watching a recording in the future or who's in the audience now, I should be more formal in my introduction of you as a representative of Barrett Planning Group, which is the consultant the town has engaged to develop the housing production plan for us. And Tony's been kind of with us since the start of this process. So I just wanted to kind of offer that context for the record. So go ahead.
Great. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Okay, can you see this okay? Great. So it's good to see everyone here again. My name is Tony Young, and I'm with Barrett Planning Group. And yeah, I'll just get started here. So last we met, we had just finished up the housing needs assessment draft. I had shared that with you all and asked for that all read it, review it, and submit comments to us in the form of the comment resolution matrix form. And I believe Greg had shared that with you, and we've received a few back from you, and I think we're still waiting on a couple more. So please, when you can, just fill that out, and the sooner we can get them all back, the sooner we can make any necessary revisions that you feel are important. All right, and then so now we are moving on to the next phase of the project, which where we were focusing on the housing goals. So this is going to entail the vision and goals, production targets, as well as the measurable indicators, against which that the goals that we develop are going to be evaluated, and so that we can keep track, once during the implementation of the plan, that the town, can, from time to time take a look at where they are, and make sure that that they're working towards the goals that they had laid out in this plan. And then once we have the goals developed, then we will move on to the implementation strategies, which will focus on more specific and more detailed action items, and that will follow this component in pretty soon. So yeah, please be on the lookout for that. All right. Just a refresher on the housing needs assessment. Just I'll just share a couple of key points that we found, super compelling, that we had found, so that, we have found that, the median income of, I'm sorry, the income of the median household in Amherst, can only afford, a house that's, say, $285,000. The median sales price of single family home in Amherst in the past year was $600,000. So that's a difference of, $314,000, just double what we had deemed that the affordable household, or that the median household can afford in Amherst. And something that we had recently assessed, we looked at patterns of LLCs and single family home transactions, as some of you had requested to that we had looked a little bit into. We were only able to look into that pattern in the past 5 years, back to 2019. And this is just a little snippet of the analyses we had done, based on the assessor's records that were provided to us. And we found that in the past, going back to 2019, we found that there were 75 LLC transactions, and that 52 of them were homes that were sold by a resident, or a long-term Amherst resident, as opposed to 23, which were an LLC to LLC transaction, meaning that it was a home that was purchased from another LLC entity. So moving forward on to some highlights from the public survey, we had 322 completed responses. And we have found that, the top 3 housing concerns, as were chosen by the respondents in the survey, were 1, the lack of affordable rental options, 2, the need for more affordable homes for first-time home buyers, and 3, the impact of off-campus student housing on neighborhoods. And we have found that the top 3 housing initiatives that they had responded were 1, creating housing with a mix of price ranges, 2, encouraging more housing options citywide, and 3, helping people stay in their current housing and community as they age. And we, look, so these housing concerns and initiatives, they're they're just like they're the general response overall, from the 322 participants that we organized in this data set, but we wanted to look more into specific groups or demographics as well. And the survey that we had created has a feature where we can sort out and filter that information. So we looked at the responses from the homeowners in town, as well as renters, and looked at what differences or how one group of people might respond to these questions compared to what another group might say. So we had found that 82% of renters say that they have experienced cost burdens in the past year, compared to just 31% of homeowners. 72% of homeowners want to stay in Amherst, and that group emphasized low property taxes and the walkability of town as necessary factors that would compel them to stay. Whereas 54% of renters say that they want to stay and age in Amherst, and they placed more importance on expanded community service and as well as the availability of smaller homes. And we looked at the responses from non-student residents. So I should note, for these groups, renters versus owners, this is inclusive of students. In fact, approximately 92 out of, I believe it was 92 out of this 322 responses were in fact students who had responded. So we filtered that out to find information or responses from non-student residents, and that 32% had said that they are likely to move out of Amherst within 5 years, citing high housing costs. 46% had experienced cost burden at least once in the past year, and 68% of low-income residents. And for the purpose of this survey, we define low-income residents as those households earning $30,000 or less. They say that it is important for them to stay as they age, and they cite similar things as the previous responses. They cite housing affordability, expanded community service, more transit options, and accessibility improvements to their home as their most important factors. And that they're the most important housing initiatives to low-income non-student residents is the preservation and maintenance of existing affordable housing. So similarly, we wanted to look how students responded. 71% said that they were cost burdened all year round. So every single year in the past year, they would have to pay over 30% of their income on housing. And there was actually a very strong consensus on or for more smaller multifamily and mixed-use apartments in Amherst, and that they had felt that there was actually a lack of these type of housing in town. And lastly, we found that for multi-generational and senior households, most residents living in multi-generational multi-generational household surveyed would like to add an accessory unit, accommodate additional residents, or have already done so. And that 18% of residents age 65 and over intend to move to a different house within Amherst within 5 years. And the most popular reason being that they want to downsize or live in accessible housing. Okay, so moving on to the last meeting earlier this week. We had a few stations around the room where we had specific prompts that we had on posters and that we had asked participants to respond to. One of them being a visual preference survey. It seems to us that, you know, cottage cluster or cottage style developments, 2 to 3 family housing and accessory dwelling units being the top 3, you know, most popular types of housing, as far as votes are concerned, and you know, mobile homes, single family homes, and larger new construction of you know, larger multifamily apartments being the three most polarizing types of housing in town. The other activity station where we had written out 4 problem statements or prompts, and we had asked them to you know, respond with goals or ideas for how they think would best address these problem statements. You know, obviously this is a very limited selection and, you know, not inclusive of all the problems that we've heard in Amherst, but with that said, these are just a few examples for each. So for the lack of affordable housing, people have noted that they would like, you know, smaller, better design apartments for the multi-generational community, increasing inclusionary zoning, to address the shifting demographics of the aging population and student children under 18 population declining. They feel like it would be best addressed if the town were to increase funding for public schools, and that the town needs to find ways to attract families and not just retirees. And for limited student housing options, you know, people were on, you know, opposite sides of the spectrum. One saying that there should be more on-campus housing, and another person saying that on-campus housing is not, you know, the issue, saying that, you know, a lot of students, in fact, want to live off campus. Same with, you know, professors, grad students, and that there, you know, needs to be more mixed home communities for, you know, people with moderate incomes. So these are just, you know, verbatim from you know, what people had responded with. I do have the posters. I do have the files. I'm happy to share, you know, with you all the complete responses and the full list of responses that have been submitted by people earlier this week. And another station we had done was a simple mapping activity. We had asked where people think which types of housing development would like to see. So the very dark red stickers represent, you know, more dense housing, like larger multifamily apartments. The orange are, you know, smaller, medium multifamily, and yellow being single family homes. And this, you know, this shows where people think or feel that they would like to see, you know, certain types of housing development in town, with a lot of, you know, very dense multi-family housing on or near campus, the downtown, and then, yeah, as you go further down South Amherst, there's quite a few multi-family housing. So, and here are a list of past and current goals of the previous plans related to housing in Amherst. The most recent being the Housing Trust Action Plan. And we have the 5 goals from the housing policy in 2021, as well as the production target number that was developed in the housing production plan in 2013. This is sort of just to give you a sense of, what we're sort of looking for as far as when we're developing goals, giving you a good idea of, we want to have, ambitious, but also very realistic goals. And that we're not, at this point of the project, we don't want to look too much into, specific action items, but more so, just overarching ideas that, what you're aiming for as a town and as a community. And so with that said, yeah, I'll leave it back to you, Greg. Oh,
Thanks,
yes.
Tony. And fun to see a little of the initial feedback from Tuesday and some more survey data synthesized. Yeah, why don't I see at least one hand. Tony, maybe you can stop sharing so we can see the whole thing. But I think we're gonna have some space for dialogue in a couple of minutes. But if folks have specific questions for Tony, Carol, I see your hand there.
I just wondered, in looking at all those statistics at the beginning about percentage of this and that and the other thing, there were 322 respondents, and I wondered, of those respondents, how many were renters and how many were homeowners, because that seems like it might be relevant to all those other percentages.
Sure. I can't recall off the top of my head how many exactly there were for each, but I'll note that down and I can get back to you after this meeting.
It wasn't quite like 50-50, but I think it was something around 60-40, kind of informal. I looked at it earlier today,
Okay.
kind of something else. And I think there was a fair amount.
60 being renters, 60-40 renter owner.
No, and then the opposite. I think
other way. Okay,
a
thank you.
majority of respondents, I think, were homeowners. Sorry, or it may have, or in truth, I may have been looking at single family units versus. Perhaps I shouldn't have commented. Now I'm pretty sure it was a little more than a majority were homeowners.
Thank you, Greg. I can look into that as soon as I can. Yeah, yes, Paul?
Yeah, I think Greg, maybe I shouldn't have commented. I was really interested in the LLC data, and I really want to dig into that, or hopefully can spend some time in the future about that. And how's that compare to other communities? Like, I'm not sure if anybody else has that kind of data. Are there any metrics that are out there in terms of what's happening in the bigger world other than just Amherst? Is that normal? Is it so? I mean, it would seem significant to me, and I think that's a thing that's a lot of concern that we hear a lot about in terms of rental housing and student housing and stuff like that. So I just want to bookmark that one.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for the question. There's no very widely used data set that is even available that looks specifically into LLCs. That sort of information is very town specific and found for the most part in the assessor's records. And so one would really have to dig into that and look at that.
Have you worked with any other communities that have collected that data, or do you know of anybody else? I mean, it's not unique to us, obviously, but
right. Me personally, no, but Judy Barrett has not looked at that, or hasn't have a system for looking at that widely, but in her experience, it's just something that each town has to look into.
I'm just curious if I'm looking for context. Like, is that a large number or a small number? I don't know. You may not answer that, but I'm just here if there's any in the planning world who's doing that kind of work.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a very good answer for you right now,
Sure.
but
No, I don't expect that. Yeah. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, Grover?
Well, I will just say, Paul, that I know that the town I used to live in, Alameda, California, had mandated a rental registry that then would note that. So I think any town that has a rental registry, you could then see which of those LLCs sold. So I know the data is possible when you have towns that have rental registries
So-
mandated.
Yeah, so we have that. So I would be curious what we have in our database for the rental registration
Yeah.
program. Interesting. Great point.
Also, I'll say that the Washington Post, because sharing things, the Washington Post actually published an article this week about uh, apartment rental landlords that are using algorithms to raise rents up and up and up. And we had one community in our town using that. So anyway, it was only one, whereas other towns had many LLCs that were using that, or businesses that were using that. So that's another thing that I noted, and I wanted to say in the public record since we're on that conversation. But I actually wanted to, yes, thank you for getting that LLC data and seeing it finally. It feels like it's been a lot of talk and narrative and rhetoric about it, and having the numbers is helpful. It's not an insignificant number, right? And also it's not the majority. So that was helpful to see. And I was curious about, at some places in the presentation, you were able to break down the responses by this was the whole number of, say, renters who responded, and then this is the number of non-students who answered. And I'd be curious if we could see that number about the gap between area median income and homeownership numbers, simply because I know most undergrads aren't looking to buy a home. Right. So what would it look like if we looked at non-student AMI in terms of the homeownership gap? Because that's a really significant number. And yeah, I would love for us to know realistically what kind of a difference we're looking at in terms of people who would actually be potentially in the market to buy a home, and what is possible.
That's a
If
good point.
it's really 300,000, or is it more like 200,000,
Right.
or like if we're looking to help make up that gap.
Okay, yes, we can. I've noted that down, and that is certainly something that would be valuable and worthwhile to look at. So thank you.
I'll just jump in to point out, did a quick little research. The article that I found has 2021 data for Massachusetts, and it was 9% of single families were sold to LLCs or other business entities in 2021.
Wait, can you say where?
Yeah, I just sent the link to Greg, so Greg can forward it on to you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Tony or Greg? You want to bring up your conversation there?
For sure. And just to follow up a couple things, it was actually split pretty down the middle. It was rent 45% and own 47%, and then a small fraction of folks in student housing, on campus housing, presumably, I think. And then another just quick contextual thing I wanted to add, and I'm limited in my. Tony has a data set he can slice. I only have a big PDF downloads at this point, so it limits my ability to see. But just today, I was looking at a lot of the written responses. We offer 2 fields for folks just offer some narrative input. And the thing I wanted to note, Tony put a survey highlight about one of the biggest issues being student impacts, right? And so there were many, many comments about student impacts written, in the narrative fields. But and some of them were, as we often hear about, concerns around, like student behaviors and how that changes dynamics in neighborhoods. But some of them were just about affordability, right? I would, of at least half, I'd say, of the comments I was scanning today were about affordability. So sometimes when people are talking about student impacts, they are talking primarily about affordability, and they're not just talking about, and I think that puts it in a slightly different context. So I just wanted to share that detail. Yeah, so kind of going from some of this input we've got and some of this, couple.
We got maybe a few more questions about
Yes.
the presentation. Allegra, please.
So I guess this is a follow-up to Greg's statement. I'm just wondering if the affordability is like concern that students can't afford housing, or concern that because of the way that they're pricing student rentals and maybe renting by the bedroom, that is then making it more difficult for other people to obtain any housing, because nobody wants to rent to a family that can only pay $3,000 when you could get like $6,000 for a by the
Sure.
bedroom scenario.
So the observation I was making was that many of the folks in the written comments who were offering concern around student impacts were relating it specifically to affordability, like what you just described, which to me, I interpret as an affordability concern, not just a, we don't like young people, concern, which is a different dynamic.
Just for clarity, she described two scenarios. Do you mean the second one? That student, because I had the same question. So the concerns are that student housing is raising the cost of housing for everyone because students are being overcharged.
I mean, I think the thing I often saw written was people talking about, there were some comments where it was like, I have 6 student houses in my block and I don't like to live near those students, right? That was there. But just as often I was reading, I can't, I or my neighbors can't compete with student, with student consumers to access a single family house or a structure that would otherwise be suitable for a non-student renting population. So, and I guess this is me reading comments. It's not, I don't have a statistical summary of them, so I don't want to weigh this too much, but I brought it up because I think it is some of from the slide that Tony showed, probably some of those folks, who picked, student impacts on neighborhoods off of a list. Some of those who wrote that as a big concern might not be saying we don't want students. Some of them might be saying that those students represent an affordability challenge, which to me, I see separately. Carol?
Yeah, please.
I think, could I just put this thing down so you could hear me? I've also, at least anecdotally, heard from students that students can't find anything affordable to them to rent either. So it's both that what they do afford or what landlords can get pushes rents up so nobody else can afford it. But students don't really, there's a lot of students who don't have anything that they find affordable here
For
also.
sure.
So both things are true.
Lots of those comments in there as well from people who are studying here as well. That was also, I mean, the majority of the comments that I saw talked about affordability. Fewer of them talk about, quality of life stuff. So, and I guess I'm biased too, but in that regard though, moving just to goals, right? And to, how we can craft some. So let me just bring a few slides up here. So, and hopefully folks can see. So basically where we are now in this process is, all this, we'll take needs analysis data and, public input, which has been ongoing since August, really, conversations and input that you all have offered. and we'll move into, creating some goal statements. So tonight's task, I don't think it's particularly productive to try and create an exhaustive list of goals and wordsmith every one. I think rather, my hope is that this group can, share if you have strong feelings on what should be part of the goals, that this is the time to kind of begin to stamp it with your individual, and especially any combined trust consensus on what feels important to have as goals in this thing. I would expect that, if the trust comes up with 2 to 4 things that feel really important, those would probably be part of a bigger set of goals, which we'd eventually have and then go into strategies. But my thinking is that, this is an opportunity to, name what the important things are to all of you as kind of the, one of the core, maybe the core housing brain trust in town. So we're just hoping to get some feedback from you all tonight on, what feels important and what, is important to you as individuals and as a group, and, what should be in the plan as goals. I think my hope is that our goals are a little less generic than the housing policy goals that Tony shared before. And tonight you're welcome to share very specific or very broad goals or whatever feels important. We don't have to, narrow it that way, but loosely speaking, the idea here is that we're potentially aiming goals, on, who should be served, or, where and what neighborhoods might they be served, what kind of homes might best serve them, what, community capacities, either internally or in collaboration with partners, does the town have to add in order to, to do better at housing? And so, these are basically intentionally broad domains, and I think probably, specific priorities would emerge within these. So an example, might be, folks who are, on the income side, the group might have strong feelings on, hey, the town should, have a named goal of serving, people of a certain income class, in the housing parlance side, perhaps people of very low income, or perhaps there's a priority to serve, people of, of middle income, et cetera. What kind of characteristics? Perhaps we're focused on, homes for, for people who experience disabilities, or people who are retail workers in our stores, families or individuals, or, household structures, aging households who might be focused on downsizing. You could offer feedback on locational ideas, and as I mentioned, and this might be, specific sites. We will have, regardless, a list of sites in the final document. You could or could not choose to weigh in tonight on that. It might be, let's prioritize connection to open space, that kind of thing. And then, again, what kind of, are there typologies or development types we should be prioritizing, rent versus ownership, et cetera. And then, the, sort of additive capacities and resources, are there key entities that the town should really prioritize in engaging better? Are there zoning strategies that, feel vital? Are there, services we should coordinate with, et cetera. So, I think these are kind of the domains. We don't have to cover all of those. Those are really just prompts for all of you to kind of begin considering. And naming a goal does not mean, I think, we're exclusive from other goals, right? So I think if the trust feels strongly that we should serve people of, of 30% AMI and really prioritize that as a named goal in the housing production plan, that doesn't mean the town will have to exclude all others. It's more a question of, what are the things that feel really important to you all? That's kind of where I'm asking, or I'm starting tonight. So maybe I'll just stop there and see if my proposition even makes sense here. And go from there. And Carol will probably tell me pretty quickly whether or not it does. Go ahead.
All right, so Carol's going to break the ice. We're trying to kind of weigh in on the approach of how to address, the multifaceted housing crunch of the town. Carol.
My answer probably isn't going to fit any of the things that you said anyway, so I thought I'd get it out of the way so you can get to whatever you really want to talk about. I would like to see the town be incredibly more flexible in its attitude towards people who come with different ideas about how to do things. I would like, that's my biggest concern. We aren't going to think of all the ways that something could be done. And if we create something that makes more flexibility, somebody with a piece of property where they want to develop something or other, but it doesn't quite fit, but it would make some housing that's more affordable than if we didn't say yes, that ought to be able to happen. That's the main thing I think is important.
Can I ask just to land it a little bit or place it in something without an example being restrictive, and we won't hold you to it per se, but is there an example that stands out?
Well, it's like the guy Sam that we were talking to the other, what night was that? Anyway, I mean, he has a piece of property and he wanted to build something with 6 bedrooms so he could charge less rent, but he wasn't allowed. I don't know the whole story, and I don't want to end up misquoting something, but it's not only that. There are other places where I know of people having wanted to, and maybe this is now going to become easier, the accessory dwelling units. A lot of things are making that easier, but it's hard. There's a woman living near here in a ramshackly rundown place. She had to move into the garage because she wasn't allowed to develop the house into 2 units. So she moved into the garage and then rented it out as rooms to people because that's the only way she could do it. There are people who have ideas of something to do, but they get bollocks when they try to go through town's rigmarole in order to be able to do it. And I feel like they get this instead of let's see how we might make it work.
Thank you.
Yeah, other thoughts, other kind of wish list type of views about how the housing solutions can unfold. Yes, Erica.
So I'm probably in Carol's space where, for me, the first thing is to think about what do I want Amherst to look like, and having flexibility is really important, and maybe those are some of the principles that we should state before we come up with a finite plan, which is, this may be a plan, but our principles are around equity, our principles are around, wanting to see diversity of types of buildings, diversity of types of family configurations, including students. I mean, I think, when you start with the principles, you get closer to the goals of how to actually get there. And when you have a vision of what it is that you want Amherst to look like. And when I see all those different specific elements, I think it's going to be so specific that it might, close out other ideas or people's or place types. And so I think, so preamble, which I'm sure, you guys have thought about this, of here are the principles, even though we're looking specifically like this, because this is what we see as a gap right now in order to create that vision of Amherst that is inclusive, that is diverse, in terms of diverse housing types, diverse people, that really supports those who would be able to work and live here, study here. These are sort of the areas that we see as gaps, but it's not exclusive of other ideas.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you, Erica. And to reiterate, I don't see either tonight's exercise or the goals, when the final product, I don't think our goal would be to say if it's not in the housing production plan, you can't do it. I think right now, especially, it's more opportunity to say, hey, if there are really important things, that we want the town to prioritize, especially with, it's one thing when somebody owns a property, wants to develop it. Hopefully we can make it smoother to do, but the trust has limited resources. we're all, we're gonna the planning department will prioritize, a finite number of things amidst a universe of things they could do. I mean, things like that. I think that's where, if there are, things you feel really strongly about, hopefully we can inform, the work over the next several years with those things.
Well, seeing no hands, I'll jump in. I mean, I think it's really important to continue to attract families so that we keep our public schools full and the budget for the schools and the quality of the schools up. I also think that it's a priority to keep older folks who want to stay in this town around here, because the cultural life of Amherst is has a median age of 70 still, and they're very important to this town. Grover.
Seeing that presentation, I feel less compelled to talk about specific groups of people that the town should prioritize, but more like, it seems to me that there's a couple of like housing needs that would serve any number of communities, or even communities that we don't imagine right now, because this is for 2030s, like, what is math? It's a while from now. And so we don't, LA just had 1,000 homes burn just in the last 2 days, right? Like, we don't actually know what our housing needs will be then. And I think this is a good assessment of what's happening now, and we can guess what's happening there. But I think there's some clear things happening that need to be the priority, like stopping the meteoric rise of what it costs to own a home in Amherst feels clear, and that a significant amount of renters are cost burdened, which is true nationally, but is true here. And really, I mean, 82% of that number is wild. So there's a number of approaches or mechanisms and policies that this town could take to get at that. You could get the state to allow rent caps or rent slowing, right? Like, there's all kinds of things that we could do that might not be politically popular, but they could be done. And also, it just seems clear that more, to me, that smaller homes and multifamily homes or multiple homes on a plot of land is a priority, no matter who it's serving. So it's, people didn't like the big multifamily housing, but a lot of people liked triplexes and cottage style, right? And I'm not saying we need to be like, these are all we build, but in terms of a strategy, we know that having smaller homes and more homes on every plot of land will lower the cost. So, and then if you make them accessible, which I didn't actually see any accessibility information in the presentation, that would be helpful. But even a priority of increasing the number of homes that are accessible, or at least whatever the word is for, like, mostly accessible, except for
Convertible.
actual ADA compliance, would go a long way, both for people who become disabled who aren't elders yet, and the elders aging in place. So it seems to me that there's some very clear, like, housing priority interventions that will touch a lot of the needs. And in terms of identity or groups, that's not yet clear, but when I was growing up, a lot of college students lived in squats. Like we don't know what college students will do to house themselves. But if we create more homes, and then the current model that we have, which is charging $1,000 per room, might be a legacy of the past, and there might be something new that emerges.
Great. Thank you, Grover. Yeah, so densification and smaller and more accessible homes. Rob or Allegra or Alex, Paul, reactions, comments here? Yes, please, Paul.
I would just, in one remark, in response to Grover, is that in municipal time, 2030 isn't that far away. How long it takes to get stuff done. I mean, it's like we need to be talking now and planning because it takes years. I mean, look at the work that is in process now. It's going to be, and it's still years away. So I think that what the trust job is to say where just to point the direction to go. And so we know where we should prioritize it. It keeps coming up. What are your priorities in housing? And I think this is what this housing production plan is so valuable for, because it's the only way the town is going to really articulate what it is that the direction we want to go in. Whether we've mentioned lots of different strategies, and just setting those priorities is the hardest thing for the town, I think. And I think that we've done a really terrific job on this committee to start that conversation. But I think it is really, the challenge is going to be to drive that to some conclusions. And here's what we think is the top 2 or 3 things, the top 2 or 3 strategies. And I just, I do just want to say, Greg has been phenomenal at making this a priority and moving it forward. He's really terrific at that. So thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Rob, please.
So I think, when we get in these groups, we always talk about density, increasing density, or small houses. And that seems like a great idea. That seems like something that, everyone should be able to support. But then when you get in practice, don't support it. They don't want it next to them. So my take on that is that we should encourage and promote density when it's affordable, when what is created is affordable. We should be able to make it so that the zoning bylaw can be stretched or changed when what results is affordable units. And that, I think, makes it more comfortable, makes it more logical.
So to meet the political opposition that crops up when it's density or height on the block with the argument or the reality that what's coming is affordable, that's the way to make progress. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. Grover, is your hand up again, or is this from okay, Erica?
So I'm thinking about all the data that was presented, and just thinking about some of the things that were stated just a while ago. Attract families, which I think is so important, and students do have families, so I think making it affordable for both families who live, work, study here is important. Seniors, I think that has been shown with the senior study that we did with the senior center, that seniors want to live, they want to age in their homes, or they want to downsize to smaller homes. So I think, building smaller homes on smaller plots is also really important. And then creating density in terms of what Rob stated is important. So what I was thinking much more of, what could the role of an housing production plan be, is you had that map of Amherst, and people did that mapping activity. But I think, with all the data that we have, is literally looking at places where we can actually recommend, maybe this is a great area where we can do small homes on small plots, or this is a great area to increase, to have duplexes, literally mapping that out as recommendations as part of it. And I know that's going to the recommendation area, but I think, that what's the town's role is really to take that data and to think about strategies and presenting it so people can look at that and get behind it. And so I think, all these areas are priorities, but literally looking for places where you can actually do it and it's doable, and giving recommendations of how to do it in that area, I think will get more people behind it.
Getting into the strategy realm, it's almost like pre-approvals of, in perhaps in certain areas. We heard Rob Williams talk about that a month ago. The idea of pre-approved ADU stuff is happening in some parts of the country.
wondered, Tony, Greg, what what has the feedback so far elicited for you as questions that you would like feedback on at this time?
All right. Do you mean like, do we have any questions?
Yeah, does hearing us talk, Tony, generate questions for you that you'd like us to give you feedback on?
No, not at this point. I think right now I just want to listen and first
Okay.
just take in and absorb everything that you guys say, and yeah, I think just whatever Greg is trying to do here is just going to be very helpful for us in developing goals and presenting it back to you as a group. And yeah, I think I'll save my questions
Okay.
For later, as what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah, and
yeah, go ahead, Greg.
yeah, I mean, I guess the noting that it's approaching 8 or whatever, I want to one thing I'll say is we can hear we have a few public attendees in the space now. I don't know if we want to hear from anybody who's in the room. It might be a good juncture for that. And I'm not, and it's possible folks are multitasking too. But if anybody is in the audience and wants to weigh in, and this is always a window. And you folks can raise hands later on too. That's fine. But yeah, no, I mean, I think, this is a good start, and I think, and I think when we're in the realm of goals and not necessarily strategies yet, like, I guess you all are surprisingly sort of disciplined about kind of staying in the goal realm, and I'm thinking of, Grover, I kind of interpret in part one of your comments is, look at the affordability problem and find routes to solve it, rather than, solve it this way or solve it that way, I mean, and I think, density is, certainly, kind of the most basic step towards that. And you noted it as well, but I think, this is helpful. And I think, we'll hopefully layer on well to, some of what Tony's already gathered at the other events. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna respond to say, I hope my comments came through as it feels clear to me what our goals should be. We should do them. We should set them and then do the hard work of doing them.
For sure. And I think, I have one question, and I think, we've gone back and forth in this a little bit. I don't know whether we settled at the staff level, but from the goal, so the there is a regulatory framework for this from the state, which spells out a sort of prescribed annual goal, which is like it's like a certain percentage of our existing housing stock, but it doesn't really relate to need at all. It's just, it's based on like, the state's idea of what perhaps a reasonably applicable goal might be across all towns in Massachusetts. When the trust created some unit goals, I think, based it more in if we really stretched and everything came together, and we caught a few lucky breaks, this is what we could get done as the trust, or this is what we could have our hands in as the trust. I think it's still an open question how we name our unit production goals for this document. It could reflect a reasonable, a sort of similar approach at the town level scale. So, if things go perfectly well and we catch some lucky breaks, what could the whole town get done? And these would be affordable units we're talking about here. Or another way to create numbers, would be to name, do our best estimation of the units that we need based on the need we've identified, which would be significantly larger numbers, and also probably, probably much more pie in the sky, if we're applying realism to it. But I'm curious if folks have thoughts on how we should represent those numbers. It's more of a messaging question in a way than a practical one. But would you like to see the need represented or kind of the practical possibility represented?
Carol, go ahead.
Well, that's a clarifying question. I'm not sure.
Can you put your
Sorry. Sorry. I'm not sure when you talk about it, the housing production plan is the town's production plan, right?
Mhm.
It's not
Yep.
the trust's. So it is going to say what the town thinks it should do. I'm confused when you talk about it. It feels like I'm getting confused by whether we're trying to come up with the trust's plans or the towns, and they don't seem like they might be exactly the same. And so I'm just trying to clarify what we're exactly trying to do in your description of what we're trying to do.
Sure. So presumably, if the trust has a certain capacity, the town has that number plus more, right? I mean, presumably there'll be some units the town, develops that the trust won't be involved in. Probably will be involved in a lot of them or most of them. But so I guess I'm asking, should we represent, what's reasonably doable? Or another way to come at it might be to say, hey, there are this many, cost burden renters at this income level. And if Amherst were a totally affordable place, this is the deficit of units, right? That deficit would represent probably a significantly larger number than kind of what we could, program for, if that makes sense, or what the state would require of us, so to speak. They don't technically require anything, but they want the plan to, have a certain number, which is like, it's like 0.5% of your housing stock a year or something like that. Or maybe folks don't have thoughts on this at all, and that's
No,
fine.
I do have thoughts, but let's hear Grover first.
Well, to your question of, is this a messaging question? The comms hat is, to whom are we communicating? Because that would really inform how we message it. So my question back to you is like, is this about how the report itself is written up, which means that, every town councilor that comes on will hopefully read it. Every person who joins every housing board will read it, and the reporters will read it. Probably not too many citizens will read it. Right? So like, is it that, or is it about how the problem is presented? I don't know if this has come before town council yet, for example, like, or, I guess it's like, I would present the presentation that Tony just gave felt great for me as the audience, as like a slightly wonky housing person. And yeah, if we're trying to solve for like, how do we get as much done that needs done without public opposition, it was / with public support, then that's a different question, because then it's like presenting the information in a different format. Like I see there's a reporter on the call now, but like, yeah, like how are we going to tell the story in the media about the needs? Certainly, but then also it's one thing to say we have this big need, but I know from my work and my research, the vast majority of people don't think that anything can happen to change it. Like they feel very despairing that there's actual solutions. So then in terms of the work of presenting the housing production plan, do we present it as the superhero? Like, or do whoever's writing it, write it as like, actually there's a ton of opportunities and we're going to lay this out in our next section of the strategies and goals that we're taking up.
Okay.
What's the stock answer on the audience for the production plan? I mean, Paul's comments earlier suggested that it's almost the town itself, the bodies of the town having kind of a common goal.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, it's funny. I'm just like processing, Grover's very good questions there. I would say the full document is traditionally, and Tony, you might have thoughts on this too. Yes, it's for that internal audience or that semi-internal audience of board members and that litany of folks Grover named. Perhaps folks who are housing professionals in the region. We have one on the audience as well. But I think there's also and much of what my gut reaction to many of the comments we're getting is that I think there is an opportunity for communication to the greater public too. I think that is, as far as I can tell, a less common use of these documents, but that doesn't mean it's not a valuable effort either. So yeah, so I guess the direct answer to Grover is that the traditionally used internally among those bodies, what we'll use it for. Now I'm kind of crunching harder on that, and I'm hesitant to say if I have a strong answer of what's most important.
If I can add,
Go ahead.
so what would the problem be of having both? The prior housing production plan did show the deficits, and it was always somewhat overwhelming. And it did state what the goal had to be each year in order to get to the total goal, and it couldn't be achieved because it wasn't really realistic with the resources that existed. And so my thought was, and I don't know if this is appropriate for housing production plan, but you could have what your gap is, and you can state, ideally with the research, with these types of resources that we would need in order to meet it, we would be able to achieve it. But in lieu of that, in terms of the resources we have right now, this is probably the more realistic goal in terms of how much we can do each year. And maybe hope that, that there might be more resources in the future, but with regard to the existing resources, unless anything changes, this is what is considered realistic for the town to achieve.
Okay.
I think the data about need is the essential kind of foundation for the report, and is the motivation for whatever the goals are, even though of course they're not going to answer 100% of the need. So I think that's the data based part of the story that makes whatever we need to do so compelling.
All right.
If I can just add one more thing. So what I mean by resources changing, the fact that we actually were able to have a position like yours, Greg, has really increased our capacity to look at the problems and the resources and do more. So if we were able to have more resources, then we might be able to do even more. So having, a plan that says, this is the need, this is what we could achieve if we had all the resources we need in order to do it. If the town had, a whole department of Gregs who could be innovators, who could work with developers, who could find, funding from the state, et cetera, and really move things very quickly versus these are the resources we have right now. And if things don't change, this is the realistic number that's really going to.
And I think illustrating that story for various stakeholders, is I think a worthy, objective for the document. So it's helpful. All right. Well, I feel like I have a good amount of stuff to chew on and probably a follow-up meeting I want to pitch Grover on. But Grover, do you want to wait?
I just wanted to say for the record that I liked Erica's idea of presenting like 2 lines, like here's what the ideal would be, and here's what we can do with our current projections. Because yeah, I think that is the most useful way.
Well,
Yeah.
speaking of what we can do, let's segue into subcommittee reports. If we're ready, Greg or Tony, any kind of concluding remarks before we move on?
Well, I want to say, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you, Greg, for leading this discussion. Yeah, there's definitely a lot to absorb, and I do like your ideas of having two lines representing the realistic goals, and the other being what you're hoping or striving to achieve. I think my only thought on that is like if you were to come up with a goal or a target number, then that number would inherently sorry, I'm still getting over a cold, so excuse my voice, but that target number would inherently consider resources that are out there and that the town will want to pursue in order to meet that goal. And that can also many people can consider that as might want to consider that as realistic action for the town to do, or involving and collaborating with other stakeholders. But um, I think personally I would like to think large, but and be ambitious, but it's also important to be practical as well. So those are just my thoughts. But so
I think being ambitious is practical.
Yeah, and I agree. And I guess maybe the thing that I'm sort of sitting with here is as we transition to the next piece, but is I think there is a role for the trust in bridging those lines a little bit, and especially in our committee structure with an education an engagement entity now. I think like spreading a message of possibility, and kind of counteracting, what Grover aptly noted, which is what national data reflects, is that people tend to think it's not fixable. But I think finding ways where we can highlight the things that are fixable, that can be a really compelling role for the trust, I think, along with our core work. So.
yeah, I like your thought on messaging to Grover. I think that is very that's not talked about a lot, and it's a very underrated strategy for plans like these. It can really make or break the success of a plan. So that's something that the town and everyone involved really has to think about and consider.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us once again, Tony. You're becoming an honorary member of the team here.
I appreciate it. It's always lovely being here. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I look forward to continue working with you all. So,
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks,
all
Tony.
right. Thank you. All right. Have a good night.
All right. Good night. All right. So let's hear what's going on with the subcommittees. I guess what's imminent is the education subcommittee's debut. Maybe you can kind of fill us in, Allegra and Rob.
Yeah. Can I share my screen? I don't know if
You should be able to. Yeah.
be able to. Okay, let's see. So we have this little. Let's see. Can you see a flyer that looks like affordable housing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we have a meeting in 2 weeks at the Amherst Town Hall. And there will be Gaston and myself from the trust, Laura Baker from Valley Community Development, Tom Kagelman from Homestay Housing, Keith Ferry from Wayfinders, and then John Hornick from previously the chair of the trust. And each person will have a few minutes to talk about specific pieces of the affordable housing puzzle, and then we'll have kind of a Q&A brainstorming session. So hopefully everyone can make it or attend by Zoom. And that will be, I don't know if I actually have sent a copy of this to everyone, so I can make sure that we send that out. So that everybody has that information. But we actually had postponed our small committee next meeting until tomorrow. So I was racking my brain trying to think of why I didn't know what I was supposed to report, and it's because we haven't met since the last time we gave you an update. So other than the big thing that we're doing, there's nothing else to report, I would say.
Okay, and anything that we can do to help you ahead of that event?
I don't think so. I think actually today's presentation was pretty helpful to see some of the things that had come up in the surveys that were talked about, especially in terms of the affordability gap and the percentages of cost burdened renters and homeowners in town. So I think, you know, I think a lot of what I will at least be putting forward isn't going to be my own thought, because
Okay.
it's going to be brought from a lot of the data, and we're lucky again to have somebody like Greg and have the Barrett Planning Group doing all this work for us right now, because we actually have really recent data that we can utilize. So I'm grateful for that.
Okay, and just on that point, Greg, maybe we can get John Hornick whatever data you're comfortable sharing in advance. I'm sure he'd be interested, and it would inform his comments.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay, Erica.
I was just curious about how the publicity piece is going in terms of getting as many diverse members of our community to participate.
That is a good question. I know that there was a list of people that I think John has his usual suspects that he sends things out to. And I know that the league was supposed to be sending things out to their email list. And I think if I share the flyer, so I'm going to write that down, share flyer, with everybody on this call, as well as the members of the Community Safety and Social Justice Committee, which is going to be one of the co-sponsors in name. Hopefully there will be some trickle out.
Maybe Carol's
But
going to
if
speak
you-
to her list, but yeah, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was gonna say, if you send it to me, I can also send it to our auditor, something, housing friends of affordable housing.
Fabulous.
Erica.
Do we have a connection with the Amherst Bulletin? Because it's widely distributed,
Oh.
it's free, and there's a great little piece. I can't remember the woman's name, but I love reading her piece because she has all of the activities around all of Amherst and around the area. But it's I think it'd be great to get it in there.
The current and the indie as well have events pages.
And I will double check with John to see if he had done any of those kinds of press releases, and if not, I can certainly.
Okay. Excellent.
And we can drill in tomorrow too. With the three of us are meeting tomorrow, so we can kind of strategize in some of those nitty gritties too. I think our hope here, since the league had kind of made the original invite, our hope is that they can be a driving force behind outreach. So we can follow up with them too.
Okay.
And
Great.
I think this would all just like in a note in the head of me for now be like, as this becomes a thing that we might do again. These are the good things to work through, like, oh, press, that's important. Like, how do we actually make sure people are getting there? And that reminds me also, I want to look at the flyer and see if the Zoom link is actually on there, because that would be helpful. So these are the sorts of things that like, once you
Okay,
do it,
yeah.
you remember to do it the next time. So thank you.
Okay, it's the debut. Okay, thank you, Allegra and Alex. Erica and Rob, anything to share about the funding task, the subcommittee?
So you're asking us to remember something that happened last year.
Okay, you put it that way.
I don't think we have any
Okay,
report.
all right.
You, Eric?
Then moving to our development committee, Grover, Carol, and I with Greg. I think there's some things to share. I'm happy to start by sharing some of the details about the bank I contacted, which is interested in lending for ADU construction. So I reached out to a number of banks and had a conversation with Lighthouse out of Maine, which has gotten its national charter and in particular wants to expand in Massachusetts, and actually has the ambition of funding 500 ADUs in Massachusetts this year. And so they're very excited to hear from us. And if you're curious, I can tell you the structure of how they finance ADUs. I don't know if this group would like to get into some of those details. Yeah, okay. All right. So they are willing to lend up to 90% of future value with the ADU constructed. Max loan amount 500,000. 200 to 300,000 is their sweet spot. For this to work, it means you probably have to have some equity in your home, because their experience is that building an ADU does not translate dollar for dollar to value on the home. In other words, for the dollar that you spend in construction may not translate into a dollar of increased value on the appraised value that they use to decide how much they'll lend. It's a fixed closing rate. Interest only is charged during the construction period of up to 9 months. You can do other projects. So if you want to build a garage while you're building an ADU, they have no problem with funding that as well. It's a 30-year loan. So after the 9-month interest only period, it's a fully amortized mortgage. And they are willing to, if you're going to rent the ADU, and I suppose if you were moving into your ADU and renting your home, they credit you 100% of fair market value in figuring out your debt to income ratio.
Rental income, you mean?
The rental income. Okay. Yeah. They credit you 100% of fair market value of what you expect to rent for when they're figuring out how your debt to income ratio. And so, I've got a contact here and so on. So we've got details. They're more than willing to come down to do an event. So I guess the ambition I see is for us to have an education event where we connect folks in town who might be interested, some lenders and some builders, and some people maybe from the planning group as well. To see if we can make something happen. And I need to reach back out to Rob from UMass, but my thought is to try to pinpoint what are a couple of neighborhoods that have the right demographic of seniors, and that many of the homes can easily fit the bill for an ADU, to see if we can put something together.
My
Grover?
neighborhood.
Your neighborhood.
My neighborhood.
Okay, great. So let's talk in our next meeting, which is coming up, about how to start talking to folks. And I also have I'm connected to a CDFI in Boston that does lending for affordable housing. They won't lend to individuals, but I'm going to talk to them about the possibility of them coming in and kind of stacking on top of a mortgage from a place like Lighthouse. to possibly provide additional funding that would make the project more feasible and get the homeowner to commit to affordability in the rental. So that's one thread in our development conversation. There's also threads involving Amherst College. I don't know if there's anything specific that you'd like to share, Greg, in that conversation.
Just that I think a representative is going to join us in our next meeting from Amherst College, which is exciting, I think.
And I guess we're still. Is there information that we still want to try to get from the town about available lots?
Yeah. So we have actually have some stuff from Tony that he began parsing.
Okay.
So it's pretty raw.
Okay.
And so I think we have the ones that are town owned is a little more of a manageable file. The ones that are just vacant and irregardless of ownership, that's a little more of a unwieldy data set at this point. But and then we're hoping also to get some data. I mean, it should be possible. It is possible. Just a question of can we get it by our next meeting? But getting data on existing ADUs in Amherst, and both just understand what's there, and what people have been successful with, and perhaps also to maybe pull in some homeowners who might, or perhaps renters even, who are living in an ADU, just to hear about their process and experience. That folks like that might be a cool addition to an event, perhaps.
Okay.
All right.
We may have a short meeting. Are there town updates to share, Greg?
Yeah. So the it's going to sound kind of similar. The one thing I'll say is that there is actually going to be another event on the HPP, which will probably be smaller in scale, I'm guessing, than Tuesday was. But we're working. There's a grad student or I think a PhD student actually, who's trying to apply a certain scenario planning practice, and so she's working with us in Barrett. So that will be probably on the 11th of February, perhaps on the 18th, the following week. In final details are still coming together on that. I'm trying to make sure that's successful, and we're working with a very very talented student, but it's sort of different structure. So we're kind of trying to cross T's and dot I's there. Wayfinders development is at the ZBA again tonight. The word I've gotten for a while now is that it's almost done, but I've been hearing that for a while. So I'm hesitant to say it's almost done because that's kind of what I've been hearing. But questions of what the building looks like are done, and it's more about the management plan now is what they're into. And I my understanding is they're close, and the draft order of conditions is basically complete. So once they have it, there won't be much writing to do. Or the attorneys have already, I guess we've written everything, or the planning department's written everything. The attorneys have already looked at it, and then it's just a question of negotiation between Wayfinders and the ZBA on the final details of that. So, Carol, go ahead.
Do you know if if the time frame is still going to work out for them to go to the funder?
I did ask, and so my understanding, when I spoke with Jamie a couple of weeks ago, he said if they voted tonight, for sure. As far as I could tell, maybe folks on staff were a little less confident that there would be a vote tonight, or a little less certain. I don't think tonight's the be all end all, but I think there's another month and a half or so before they have to have it. I guess technically they could apply without every last detail in place. Apparently we did something in the past like that, but I think it's better for them to have a proper, a proper permit, comprehensive permit in hand before they go to the state. I think that can still happen. I did ask Jamie, and he was not ringing alarm bells on that. So,
I guess I would just
so
say, if you hear alarm bells
yes.
and there's something that we should go to do something, you'll let us know, right?
Yeah, I will. If it seems, and it might be good to, I'll get an update probably Monday on what happened tonight at the ZBA, and maybe I'll just zip a quick line either way to the whole trust on that. And then the others, heads up is, we are imminently re-releasing a RFI seeking written quotes for the South Amherst property to do a scoping process and like what the best housing model is down there. I know folks had questions of like what the function of that is. And I think it was suggested to me that it was in order to sort of narrow the typology that might be down there, or the type of housing probably affordable, but I suppose they might recommend otherwise. That would inform an eventual RFP for that site as well. And then finally, we are getting to work on an RFP for the VFW site, which would happen sooner, obviously. So that's in the works as well. And the hope is to have that out in the world in the spring. Like we're targeting April 1st to have it published.
Erica.
Any word on the CPA funding?
Yes, thank you. So the CPA voted and recommended that we receive $300,000. So sitting here, I think did we get 250 last year, or was it 300 last year as well?
I think we got 300,000, even though
Okay, so it's the so yeah, so I don't believe council has voted on it yet, but my understanding is council rarely alters what CPA recommends, and so we went into that, I think, with the voice strategy that we would ask for more, noting that it's been reduced in the past. So we, so that's where that is. Allegra, yeah.
This is like a super specific question, but do you happen to know like the size of the lot in South Amherst?
Offhand, I do not. So, I mean, I think it's a fairly sizable. I mean, I think it's around an acre. In that range. It's not gigantic, but it's not itty bitty either. So
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Erica.
I just wanted to make a comment, which was, in the past year, thinking about how much we've been able to achieve, which we have a lot, but how long it takes for things to move forward. Just want to reiterate, I think the HPP should have an inspirational number, but there should also be a realistic number, because things take forever to move forward. And I think, the role of the trust and the town is to be a catalyst to get these things moving, and is moving as fast as we can. So I just want to really reiterate that we should have an inspirational number, but we should also have a number that we think might be a little bit more realistic with regard to the resources we actually have.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything that has come up that wasn't on the agenda that you'd like to share? Any observations or anything else to bring up before we adjourn our meeting?
I just had a question. Sorry. I'm not sure if you were
Yeah,
nodding
go ahead,
at me or
Erica.
somebody else. I believe we still have Grace with us. I'm wondering if Representative Dom is thinking about still supporting the real estate transfer fee because it is in study, and often what happens with legislation that's in study is that it never moves out of there. And so that is one of the areas that our subcommittee is looking at. And so I was just wondering if Grace has any thoughts on that or knows anything that she can that Grace can share with us.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Gotcha. So, first of all, just wanted to wish you all Happy New Year. Great to see you all in the new year. In terms of the, sorry, I'm just trying to pull some stuff up.
Grace, would you like me to promote you to a panelist? I didn't want to just pop you on the screen without asking. Can I?
No, that I can, I
Just
don't
wanna
have
talk.
anything to show, so
Okay.
it's okay just talking, but pull some stuff up for my reference just because we're in the middle of bill filing right now, so there's a lot of different things going on. But yeah, essentially I believe for the home rule petition, any sort of home rule petition of that sort, I think that we are in the representative is in direct conversations with the town about that, and basically once the town confirms, yes, we want this to be refiled, then she can go forth and do so on behalf of the town. But I just think that that is the that's still being coordinated at the moment.
Thank you, Grace.
Of course.
Sounds
And
like
I'm happy to also raise that, check in with her on that and get back to you all.
Grover.
Just wanted to note that the annual homelessness point in time count was released since our last meeting, and the numbers increased 18% nationally. I haven't gotten a chance to look at the Amherst numbers closely, but it's taking a moment to reflect on that, and I imagine we'll be having conversations with that part of our community in the months ahead, but noting that.
Thank you for sharing that. Legra. Oh, you had your hand. Is that a false hand? Okay. Well, I guess on last chance to bring anything up. Otherwise, we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay.
Actually, point of process, did we give community members time to raise something? Not just the board? Isn't that how the structure of the meeting's supposed to go?
Let's see. Is that any I think it's just Grace and Tony who are here with us actually at this point.
I see.
So if you want to share anything else, please let us know. I suspect. Oh, Grace, please.
Still have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, that was an accident. I didn't
Okay.
realize I lowered it. But once again, Happy New Year, everyone. It's
Okay,
really
Happy New Year. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Sorry to interrupt, Gaston. I
No,
just
not at all. Don't. No,
wouldn't want somebody
good
who waited the whole meeting and it
it's
just.
good to get if someone shows up to one of these meetings, they deserve to speak.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, we got us. Oh, so all in favor of adjourning? Okay, everyone. Nice to see you. Have a great night and keep up the good work in your committees.
Good night, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.